in a way that you're following everybody around and just letting us know exactly what is happening as they're dealing with all of the shelters right there.
You know, when people are asked to evacuate from their homes, and some people like me, I have my family here, my parents, my brothers, I have my in-laws here as well, and many families, they have to make the very difficult decision. Where do we go? Do we go to one side of the family, the other side of the family? And Laura Rodriguez is in Westchester with some families and how they made their decision where to stay. Laura.
Well, in this case, it's my family, and both sides of the family are actually staying at this house. This is Abuela's house, my grandmother's house in Westchester. So why did they decide to stay here? Well, Abuela's house has a very good roof. She had it redone less than 10 years ago, and she's had these shutters up for several years already, accordion shutters, so very easy to get together. So now I'm going to take you inside my grandmother's house, Esperanza de Varona here, and some of the family members have already arrived. My aunt and my uncle live in an evacuation zone, so they wanted to get a head start and make sure that tomorrow they weren't stuck in any sort of traffic, and of course that they were safe. First up right here, my aunt's personal documents. I did this as well. Just obviously any important paperwork, put it in plastic bins in case there's any flooding. This area is not generally prone to flooding. It is not an evacuation zone, but it's always good to take that extra precaution. Of course, here are some of the De Varona family members, my aunt, my grandmother, my other aunt, my uncle, and this is my great aunt, and she actually lives across the street from my grandmother. So the two sisters live across the street from each other. So in case there's an emergency, so the family's going to be splitting up in between both houses. If there's an emergency, they can just walk over. I don't know, maybe throw a mattress. Hopefully there's no flooding, but if they need to get across the street, there's that second hand, an extra line of help. Obviously, it's always great to have a family member as a neighbor, of course. So now let's bring you inside the kitchen here, because very important, the food. I'll show you some of the provisions. First, though, the batteries and flashlights. They have plenty of flashlights. There's also some in another room, very well equipped with all sorts of things here. And then breakfast items. This is not all the food, by the way. Like I mentioned, there's 8 relatives staying in this house alone. In the other home, there are going to be another 4 people staying. So this is just one of the baskets. This is actually coming from my parents. So, of course, we have, you know, Lucky Charms cereal. This is my sister. She's still a kid at heart. The adult beverages. I know many people at home, obviously we have to take the storm seriously, but you know, a lot of people are drinking a lot of wine right now to get them through these difficult times, the very anxious times around here. And I know the freezer is completely stocked. I can't take a look in there right now because it's going to be too hard to get to. And poor Robert is maneuvering here through the house. So also very important, radio, of course, in case the power goes out. This is a radio with a little TV. And my grandmother's TV actually right now isn't working. She's having some sort of an issue with her box. So she's having a little bit of an issue with that, but luckily we have radio, and they are tuning into NBC6 on the radio already, and also on the NBC6 News and Weather app. I know my aunt is watching right now on her phone, so that's another method. If your TV happens to go out and you still have Wi-Fi, you can download the NBC6 News and Weather app and stay tuned. So I'm going to take you into one of the rooms so you can see some of the setup. I know my mom already brought 2 mattresses. There is a pull-out couch here, but she brought 2 twin mattresses just because it's a little bit more comfortable, obviously, to sleep. Some comforters. I'm sure a lot of you are at home right now packing up all of those last-minute essentials. Very important to get you through this storm. Food, mattresses, many of the things that many people are taking to shelters. This is definitely could be a big project, right, for many out here. And I want to talk to first my uncle here. He lives in Bay Harbor Islands, right? So his name is Frank Verona. And talk to me a little bit about why you decided to evacuate. Did you live at your home, at that home, during Hurricane Andrew, or no?
No. And Hurricane Andrew was at another home in Perrine, which was destroyed. But we have a mandatory evacuation in Bay Harbor Island. So the prudent thing to do is to leave and go to high ground, and that's where I'm here. And I wanted to be with my mom and my aunt, to be with them, even though they have shutters. I want to make sure that they're protected.
And are you worried about your house? thoughts right now? What's crossing your mind? I know we were talking a little bit earlier about the fact that you Andrew.
Well, and Andrew, thankfully, my family had moved away for the hurricane because of the threat of it was totally destroyed. Nothing survived except a few personal items.
So is this storm tough for you? I know there's a lot of anxiety around Hurricane Irma. Are you feeling anxious? What are you feeling since you did see devastation, since you came back to a home essentially, almost empty or completely destroyed?
I am. There is a lot of anxiety, but I try to put it all in perspective. And what's important is that my family and everybody is okay. And so I worry a lot. I have my son and his wife, who's is pregnant with my first grandchild. They live in Tampa, so I'm worried for them more than I worry for me and for me and my wife.
And you did bring your 2 dogs. They're not in here right now. They're actually in the other house. But so many of you, obviously, of course, were. So my uncle decided to stay across the street so he could take his 2 dogs and not inconvenience my grandmother. But I'm sure there's a lot of you at home having maybe arguments or talking to your family members about, hey, is it okay if I bring my dog? Is it okay if I bring my cat? Maybe your relatives or your friends are allergic to cats and dogs. So that's definitely something tough. But are you happy that your aunt let you bring the pets, and how important are your pets to you, and to make sure that you bring them with you?
Oh my gosh, our pets are very important to us. So one of them is 16 years old, the other one is 12, and they actually were here earlier, and they just went in every room and created havoc. So my mom gets anxious, so I didn't want to give her any more anxiety other than what Irma is creating. So I decided to leave them at my Tati's house, Sylvia's house. So.
All right, great. Thank you, Frank. So let's head over to Beatrice Kraft, and this is my aunt, and she also lives in an evacuation zone in the Cutler Bay area. So when they said you had to evacuate, what were your first thoughts? I know you didn't live there back in the day when Hurricane Andrew hit. So were you prepared to evacuate?
Actually, I knew because of Andrew and where I live, I had to evacuate. I had a lot of anxiety too because I was here for Andrew, even though I lived by the charter club in the Bay, and I did not evacuate. I spent it on the bathtub. At the time, I had my husband with me. Now I don't. Unfortunately, he passed away 3 years ago. But yes, I said I better get out of here. I should have come earlier, but I decided this afternoon, I better head off. I had my mom calling me every 3 hours, So, and you were talking about dogs. Unfortunately, I do have a German Shepherd. His name is Otto, and I had to put him in the shelter. Every time I go out, that's where I take him. And I left him on Wednesday. They were closing down, and I do hope he's okay because he's part of my life.
He's your family. And also, she brings up a good point. So in her case, unfortunately, her husband did pass away, and there are a lot of people who are alone, who live alone. My grandmother also lives alone. So it's a big relief to have a family, to have this support system during this time. Can you talk about that? Talk about having a support system and knowing you have a home to go to.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was leaving yesterday for New York. I had planned this trip for about 3 weeks. And everybody's saying, but you should go to New York. Don't spend it here. But I said, no. My family is so important to me that I wanted to spend it here with my mother at her house, knowing my aunt is right across. And I know that my brother was coming and my sister and my niece and the dogs too. So everybody's going to be together, So I'm looking forward to it, to be together, spending this time. Unfortunately, I do worry about my home, flooding, the roof. My home where I live, I bought it right 15 years ago, and it was just rebuilt after Andrew. All that zone in Cutler Bay was devastated, down South Homestead. So I'm worried. I left my house. I put paintings. I put them covered them with plastic, and
luckily you have a support system, right? And that's the important message here of this story. So make sure you contact family members, friends, if you have nowhere to go. And of course, another resort, a last resort. There are shelters available. You just heard Jamie Garola talk about that. We about that all day on NBC6 News. So this is the very latest from the De Varona Abuela's bunker. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. And if not, you're all doing a great job keeping the public informed.
Thank you, Laura. And I have a very, very important question, and this is for your abuela. Is she the one responsible for cooking for all of those people? And what is she going to cook? Masitas de puerco, pork chunks, or ajiaco, like a Cuban stew? And if she is, I want some of that.
So actually, my other abuela, so like I said at the beginning, this is a family affair. Both sides of the family are coming. So my other abuela isn't here yet, and I'm sure she'll be the head chef. I have two different types of abuelas. They're asking me, by the way, they can't hear what you're asking, if abuela's going to be cooking, if she's in charge of cooking during the hurricane, but it's actually going to be the other abuela. I'm not sure what the recipes are. She makes great frijoles. I'm sure there's a cafetera in the works. This is a big Cuban reunion. I'm not going to call it a celebration because it's not, and it's not a hurricane party. And that's another observation, that in growing up in Miami, you hear people saying hurricane party. Obviously, people don't like, kids don't like to go to school. They enjoy having the day off from school. And in this case, I have not seen one person on social media or via text message say, hey, we're having a hurricane party. It's not. I mean, people are taking it very seriously, and this is an example of it. I mean, there's 8 people staying in this home, and across the street another 4, and that's just my immediate family. This doesn't even extend to cousins or whatnot. So, it's a nerve-wracking situation, but again, in this case, they're fortunate to stick through it together, and hopefully we can all get through this together.
Let's hope so.
Amen. Laura Rodriguez, thank you for that live report. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
What's better than grilling? Tailgating. And what's better than tailgating? Winning big with your Lotto, Fantasy 5, or the all-new Fast Play ticket in the cash promotion. You could win a 2018 Lazy Days Winnebago motorhome, over $200,000 in cash prizes, bowl tickets, season tickets, and more. Game day cash from the Florida Lottery. It's your ticket. Claim it.
You watched us build it. Now, Florida's largest furniture company is excited to open our newest state-of-the-art Rooms to Go and Rooms to Go Kids Fort Lauderdale Superstore at 1413 North Federal Highway, Saturday, September 16th at 10 a.m. Giving you what you want. Great-looking furniture, amazing everyday low prices, and fast delivery. So shop the new Rooms to Go and Rooms to Go Kids Fort Lauderdale Superstore, starting at 10 a.m. Saturday, September 16th, 1413 North Federal Highway.
Hurricane Irma's path gets clearer and South Florida will be affected.
And this is serious if this should come to fruition.
Take those warnings seriously.
You take action, and NBC6 gets you the latest information you need to know to stay prepared.
We're coming on the air tonight to keep you safe and informed.
Severe weather is threatening now. Stay tuned on air, online, and on mobile.
Your safety is our #1 priority. For the latest on Hurricane Irma, you're covered on NBC6.
Got Hurricane Irma questions? NBC6 has you covered. Call the NBC6 phone bank now. In English, 954-392-4770. In Spanish, 954-392-4780. NBC6 keeps you storm ready.
If the power goes out, NBC6 has you covered. Download the NBC6 News and Weather app to track Hurricane Irma. Protect you and your family with the most accurate forecast. Updates all day on the app. NBC6 First Alert Weather, keeping you safe.
All right, welcome back to NBC6 and continuing coverage as we continue to follow Hurricane Irma, possibly striking the Keys somewhere around Sunday. You heard that concern from meteorologist John Morales a little bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about evacuation, mandatory evacuations. We've talked about shelters throughout South Florida. How many people have been evacuated? Yeah. I think it was the number 5.4 million people in the state of Florida alone that have been evacuated as a result of Hurricane Hurricane Irma. But one of the issues facing some residents here of South Florida, trash. I think the last trash pickup was at 7 p.m. in Miami-Dade County, and there are still huge mounds of trash in certain neighborhoods and debris around South Florida. Keith Jones found one of those places in Pembroke Pines, and tell us what you found, Keith.
Yeah, well, you know, this Pembroke Pines neighborhood is certainly concerned with the storm approaching here, but now they have an additional problem, an additional concern. This pile of debris. What could the storm do with this massive pile of debris? Imagine 100-mile-an-hour winds, 130-mile-an-hour winds coming through here, what it could do to this. I mean, look, this resident here dumped, this looks like a banana tree trunk. They're cut up. You got a cinder block here. You've got, you know, bags of trash. You've got buckets. You've got, easily this stuff could be picked up by massive winds. This is a shingle. They're hard, they're flexible, but they're hard. You can imagine this would be like a razor blade going through the wind. You got more buckets over here. Check out this. Let's see what's under here. And more trash. Wow. Look at this. A huge pine tree. It looks like it could be a king pine. That's easily 18 inches in diameter. Hopefully that's heavy enough that the winds wouldn't be able to pick that up. Then you just got, you know, yard waste. This is obviously from taking care of the yards. You've got lawn chairs in here. Who knows what's underneath the pile. You've got these bowling balls. If wind picked this up, can you imagine that? Coconuts, you got a thing here. And now check this out. This is really dangerous. Tile. Broken tile at that. And this seems to be, this whole thing is full of it, because that is heavy. You got buckets over here. This is a paint bucket, which it's got some girth to it. I mean, all of this stuff, can you imagine if the winds pick this up? Now, there's a caveat here. I gotta kind of qualify this mound. This isn't the only resident in this particular neighborhood. The entire neighborhood is like this. Maybe not this to this extent here, but, you know, Anthony, if you can pan down there, you see piles like that, the debris. You've got tree trunks, you've got tree limbs, all kinds of stuff in the on the swale there. But this is two piles in where we're standing right now. If you check it out, if you go around the neighborhood here, which we did drive through, there are tons of piles. We saw one pile about half as big as this on top of the sewer drain. Can you imagine that they could flood their houses or flood the street? There's no place for the water to go. Now, here's the thing. Here's what's really got this neighborhood upset. Bulk pickup was scheduled for Wednesday. They were told, go ahead, put everything out. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they would be picking bulk pickup, including the trash. Apparently, the trash never came. The garbage collection didn't happen, so they have barrels of garbage, and bulk pickup never happened. Listen to this this neighbor here who said she's been waiting.
We waited all day. Everybody kept saying, when are they coming? When are they coming? So finally, we decided they're not coming. So everybody started trying to deal with it themselves in any way they could. It's usually just
documenting it.
Yes, we've taken pictures. All the neighbors here have taken pictures. There's a gentleman there, right there. He's been hauling all his bulk pickup. So we understand that it could be like a civil offense or something if you don't, and it goes through somebody's, you know, windows or hurts their property. We don't want to get sued.
No doubt. And I mean, talk about it. These could be projectiles. I saw a chair in one pile.
Yeah, we've got some chairs, and we had lots of wood and logs that, you know, you've seen on TV when a hurricane log goes through a shutter or window. So we had to make sure those were all secured.
Talked to a couple of neighbors who said if their homes are damaged, they're going to sue. All right, I want to break away from all of this here and go down to Miami-Dade County. Carlos Jimenez, the mayor there, has a news conference going on right now. Let's listen to him.
That will transport anybody that goes to those shelters to shelters that actually have capacity. Obviously, as I said before, we have the capacity to house about 100,000 people, and we're at 23,000. So obviously, there are a lot of shelters that have, you know, a lot of capacity. So I'm, you know, willing to take any questions on this issue. And yes, go.
English questions first, then we're going to do Spanish after, so there's no interruption. Mr. Mayor, could you explain again what were the problems with one system not talking to another system?
I don't know. I don't know in the news media if you have these problems where one computer system doesn't talk to another computer system. This computer system inside the intra-computer system wasn't talking to the computer system that goes out. Still is not. So we're having to do this on a manual basis. We're getting our IT people to come in and see if they can get it fixed, as quickly as possible. So that's what caused a lot of the problems and the confusion with the media as to what was open and what was not open. Somehow a list got out again, okay, and people were showing up at shelters when we weren't really ready to do so. The National Guard we have the Red Cross and they're tasked with being the operators of the shelters that we opened up. The National Guard, some of their personnel weren't going to show up till 12 o'clock tonight. So we've got Miami-Dade County personnel actually filling in for them, but they're not shelter managers, all right? So again, this is an extraordinary event with many more shelters open than we normally open. The first batch, which was the principals that know how to run a shelter, the Red Cross and us, they went pretty well. It was the other batch that ended up having principals they were thrust into a new job. The National Guard, some units were there, some were not. And so that ended up, being, part of the problem, part of the confusion, not having the communications between those shelters back and forth with us. So, this is another learning experience for this particular hurricane. We now have a process in place so that that's not going to happen again. We had people in different silos working on the same issue. Now we're going to put everybody in the same room working on that same issue. So that kind of confusion never happens again. The bottom line is, I actually, okay, I'm the one that said we're going to have 100,000 shelter spaces available. And I put really a lot of pressure on the people in that room to get that done. They did the best they could. I did the best, that I could. We did get it done, but there were some glitches along the way.
Why are there not more people? If you've got 23,000 in the shelters, where's everybody who needs to be there?
You mean in terms of personnel?
No, the citizens of Miami-Dade County who were told to evacuate.
Well, that's why I pushed for 100,000 people. I mean, so I didn't want to get to the point where I had that number of people. In other words, the normal number of people evacuated in Miami-Dade County may be 10%, all right? And so if we asked 600,000 people to evacuate, you would estimate 60,000. But this is an extraordinary storm. And so I would also want to put a factor of people that didn't feel safe even in their home, even if it wasn't an evacuation area, which, by the way, did happen too. And so we added an extra factor to get it to 100,000. Right now, there's 23,000 folks in the shelter. We expect, another batch tomorrow. A lot of people are obviously looking at the path of the hurricane and seeing if we're going to get a direct hit or not. I say, this path has been going back and forth to the right and to the left. It's better to be safe than sorry. If you're in an evacuation area, please try to find shelter with a friend, a co-worker, and if we are the shelter of last resort, but we should have enough capacity as being the shelter of last resort for the people that really need to, shelter with Miami-Dade County. Look, school board's done a great job being asked to do something that they've never been asked to do in terms of adding these additional shelters. The Red Cross did a great job in filling out the roster that they normally do. And the National Guard obviously being thrust into a job that they don't normally do either. But this is an emergency, and so when you have an emergency, it calls for unusual measures. And when you do that without the planning or the training for those individuals, glitches are going to happen, and that's what happened in this case. And that I'm not happy about. But I am happy that they did what I asked them to do, which is open 100,000 shelter spaces.
And do you expect a big rush tomorrow?
That's a hard one. I think a lot of people are going to look at this storm and see where it's going. If it's somehow, if that comes back to us, yes, I think there will be a big rush. If it doesn't come back to us, there'll be some more, but not many, not as many as probably if it shifts back to us, because I still think there's a lot of folks that are scared about 160-mile-an-hour winds. If it now looks like it's 100-mile-an-hour winds, maybe those folks will maybe just stay in their home. And I'm just being honest, okay? Those folks that are in the evacuation area, that's storm surge. That's not about wind. So I think those values are still good. They still need to get out. But hope most of those, found a spot with their family and their friends.
Mr. Mayor, could you walk us through that meeting where you said, I want 100,000 spots and shelters? Who's responsible for staffing this? Did someone tell you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have the people to do that? Or did someone say, no problem, the Red Cross will take care of this? Can you sort of help us?
No, it's somewhere in the middle. And the middle is when you ask your folks, your people, okay, to do something difficult, they will tell you this is difficult, all right. And so they told me that's difficult, and I said I understand that's difficult, but we got to get it done. And so, there was no option. If in fact, 100,000 people want to seek shelter with Miami-Dade County, we need to have that capability. I'd rather have 80,000 empty spaces than have, certain people being turned away because we have no more room in shelters. This is an extraordinary event. This is, an extremely powerful.
What do you think were the consequences of the shelters opening late and people being turned away and people being in line? Do you think that discouraged people from coming out and seeking shelter?
No, actually, I thought that would have been the opposite. I felt that my fear was that if people saw that there were people in line waiting for shelters, that there would be a rush on all the shelters because all the space was being taken up. And so what happened was a distribution problem where folks in South Dade, which obviously has the greatest number of evacuees, were actually going to their neighborhood shelter. We needed to distribute those folks better than we did. Also, there were people giving orders that and telling our bus drivers to go places where they shouldn't have, and so we rectified that once I got back. All the orders were going to come from here. All of it was going to be coordinated from here, and we were going to get people to the right place from here. Now, I'm not disparaging anybody that took initiative. But sometimes when you're trying to do the best thing, sometimes you may be sending people to the wrong place. So that level of control had to come back to the operations center.
So who was ordering county bus to go somewhere else?
Different people, sometimes a school official, sometimes a police officer, sometimes a National Guardsman would say, take those people to there. And so these are the bus drivers. So, okay, I'm going to take them there. And that's not the way it should have happened. It needed to come from here after we got the information because it was an inconvenience. But like I said, when I started this thing, back on Monday or Tuesday, was I'll probably inconvenience a lot of people, all right? But I want to make sure that they're safe. And so I'm sorry if we inconvenience some people, but it was done so that you would be safe and that you are safe. We do have 23,000 people in our shelters. They will be safe. They will be fed. And so, like I said, sometimes when you ask for very, very difficult things, there are glitches. But we have professional people, and then we solve those problems. We have to work the problem, and that's what we did. Some shelters are being staffed mainly by school board personnel. That's the principals and the cafeteria people. Then Miami-Dade County volunteers, and also the volunteers of the Red Cross. The volunteers of the Red Cross are actually the ones that manage the shelters. Other shelters are being staffed by, again, Dade County school principals and personnel, some cafeteria folks. Then also the National Guard, and then some volunteers from Miami-Dade. And in the case of some shelters right now, Miami-Dade Police is actually stepping in for National Guard. We understand that those National Guard units will be coming in at midnight. Then that will relieve Miami-Dade County Police. Sí. El fallo técnico era que no
there
había...
you're listening to Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez, who's talking about pretty much of a glitch that happened. If you've been following us and watching Jamie Garola's live reports as he's been from shelter to shelter, you've noticed that there's been some of a breakdown in the communication with dealing with some residents there, and he was talking about somewhat of a glitch that happened with the computer system and everything else, and then making sure that there was enough space for all the people. And unfortunately, the information got crisscrossed, and then some of the people got sent to the wrong shelter. No problem. Jackie is apparently has something going on with her cough. But anyway, that's exactly what is going on here. So as he mentioned, the mayor here, he says that there are currently 23,000 in the shelter right now. This is across Miami-Dade. Now, as far as down south is concerned, he says that's where like a majority of the people are that needed to be evacuated. So he's talking about some of the glitches that happened. As far as the personnel that they have working those shelters, he says it's the school board personnel, Miami-Dade volunteers, and the Red Cross volunteers. So they're trying to do their best there in order to try to help out. Okay, we're going to go back to the mayor there, Miami-Dade County Mayor. He continues to answer some questions there. Let's take a look.
You know, we learned from this just like we learned from Hurricane Andrew, and we'll be better for it. But again, I want to thank our police department, our great police department, and I want to thank the superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, who was here as we were resolving all these issues, and also the National Guard, and then all the volunteers that are really doing a great job to keep our citizens safe, and the fact that, and our fire chief also, that was able to get us 100,000 spots in shelter. Hopefully, we're not going to need, you know, most of them.
Okay, right now, again, he's continuing to answer questions right now in Spanish because a lot of people want to know about the shelter issues that are happening. They just want to make sure that people have a place to go because there has been somewhat of confusion. Hopefully, we'll be able to check back in with Jamie Garola here in just a little bit because, again, he has been following this story and some of the frustrations that were happening a little bit earlier. So hopefully, we'll be able to go back to him in just a bit. Meanwhile, again, he is answering questions in regards to some of the shelters and the glitches that happened a little bit earlier, but he has plenty of shelters there in order to accommodate at least 100,000 bodies across Miami-Dade County. And as he said he would rather have maybe 80,000 empty seats there or cots or whatever have you, as long as he could accommodate the 20,000, 30,000 people who may be in harm's way because of Hurricane Irma. So that is a big concern, but it looks like they got it together. But he says, of course, when you're dealing with something of this magnitude, things tend to happen. And that's exactly what is happening here. Okay, we will continue to follow what is happening across South Florida as we continue to prepare for Hurricane Irma. We'll be right back.
The right pair of shoes or boots can really make an outfit. At Ross, you'll find the perfect pair at the perfect price. So if you're looking for the newest trends, the latest styles at big savings,
you gotta go to Ross.
Food, water, internet. We need it to live. But what we don't need are surprises, like extra monthly fees. I see you fee played by legendary actress Angelica Houston.
You got me, Mark.
We just want fast internet for one simple rate. For all the streaming and the shopping and the newsing, but most of all, for this.
Internet for one everyday simple price and no extra monthly fees.
For years, I thought I was lactose intolerant. Turns out I was just sensitive to a protein commonly found in milk. Now with A2 milk, I can finally enjoy cereal again.
It's totally natural, and having only the A2 protein makes all the difference.
Cereals, smoothies, coffee, everything.
My first latte in 12 years.
A2 milk. Real milk that's naturally easy to digest. Love milk again.
Hurricane Irma's path gets clearer and South Florida will be affected.
And this is serious if this should come to fruition.
Take those warnings seriously.
You take action, and NBC6 gets you the latest information you need to know to stay prepared.
We're coming on the air tonight to keep you safe and informed.
Severe weather is threatening now. Stay tuned on air, online, and on mobile.
Your safety is our #1 priority. For the latest on Hurricane Irma, you're covered on NBC6.
You're gonna love the Ross Fall Fashion Event. You'll love the brands, the trends, and most of all, the savings. A fraction of what you'd pay elsewhere. The Ross Fall Fashion Event. On now.
You gotta go to Ross.
And welcome back to continuous coverage of Hurricane Irma. I'm fighting a cold, so I do apologize for that. We were listening to Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez. I was fighting the cough. And you know, the more you fight it, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Amen.
So that's what happened.
Amen.
Anyway, he was talking about all the shelters. 23,000 people have taken advantage of the shelters in Miami-Dade County. But as he mentioned, over 660,000 people have been under a mandatory evacuation. So he wanted to make sure that there was enough space for all of those people that wanted to stay. And so they opened up enough spaces for 100,000 people.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, there was some information that went out before it was supposed to go out about a particular shelter being open, and that wasn't the case just yet.
Right.
And because of that glitch, it caused some confusion.
We've all gone through something like that, you know, with our computers, computer glitches that create all sorts of havoc that's happened here at the station as well. But anyway, once again, we continue to track Hurricane Irma, and as of the 8 o'clock advisory, not much change from the 5 p.m. advisory. It's still a very strong hurricane. It's expected to impact the Middle Keys as a Category 5. It could be very devastating to that area, and they are being asked to please heed the warnings and evacuate from that area.
South Florida's Chief Meteorologist John Morales is back now with more on Hurricane Irma. John?
Yeah, one of the things I want to start showing here is our First Alert Doppler 6000, because the eye of the hurricane is starting to get closer and closer to South Florida, and we are starting to see some of the bands from this hurricane even at a great distance from our area. So here's our radar on that long range looking out into the out islands of the Bahamas. These are the great exumas down here. We're looking down into Cuba as well, and you can tell it's got, sufficient range for us to pick up things that are 260 miles away at this time. So we'll be looking for the eye of the hurricane once it comes within maybe 250 to 300 miles away for us to see actually the eye on the radar. Now, for now, as far as South Florida is concerned, a lot of this is interference, but I point out to you that we've got a lot of showers sliding in pretty quickly from northeast moving towards the southwest. The winds are frequently gusting out there to 30 miles per hour, a northeasterly breeze with gusts to 30. Some of these showers could bring even stronger gusts to the area. Now let's discuss this westward movement, which clearly is going to bring the eye of this hurricane to interact with parts of Cuba. And there's a key here called Cayo Cruz in the north central coast of Cuba, which appears to be right in the path of this system. And I remind you all that this area here, comprised of several keys on the north side of Cuba, is pretty flat, and it's really surrounded on both sides by water. And I tweet things and I get pushback from people, and everybody has an opinion. But I did tweet out the fact that I concur with Licción Avila, who is Cuban, may I add, and very, very well versed on the topography of Cuba. Licción Avila, in his discussion with the advisory from the National Hurricane Center, indicated that he is not expecting the hurricane to lose any strength with any interaction in Cuba. And I think he's onto something, because, well, first of all, what I just explained about these keys being pretty flat here, but also, you know what else is flat? just about all of this area here is flat. There are mountains in the southeastern corner of Cuba, known as the Sierra Maestra, and then you go to the other end near Pinal del Rio, and there are other mountains there. Now, granted, there is a little bit of a mountain chain down here near Santa Clara, but it's on the southern side of Cuba. So generally, I mean, this is a lot of cow pasture, a lot of just flat land everywhere, and there are no mountains here to break this up in any way, shape, or form. And since interaction with Cuba is expected to also be a glancing blow, because this westward track is not expected to last all that much longer. I mean, here we are past 9 p.m. on Friday, and the turn towards the northwest is anticipated to start on Saturday. Well, therefore, the Cuban influence, the land influence upon this hurricane may not be as much as people are trying to pin their hopes on right now. About 280 miles away from South Florida is the eye of the hurricane right now. And if you saw my previous presentation here, just maybe a half an hour or so ago, we had this breaking news. Actually, it was more than a half an hour ago. The fact that the aircraft had measured winds to 176 miles per hour and had seen the pressure drop in one of the drop zones that they drop out of the belly of the plane. The pressure had dropped to 920 millibars, which is 4 millibars lower than the 8 p.m. advisory had for Hurricane Irma. So, you know, we've got the potential here of, at least on the short term, an intensifying hurricane. The eye also contracted again. It was 46 miles. It's down to 35 miles across. So watching for trends on the eye too. But that information rather is not included in this 8 p.m. advisory. So that, you know, you see it's listed here as 924 when it's actually 920. And that wind was measured at flight level, so it's not necessarily going to be what you measure at the surface. Nevertheless, it's certainly a very high wind speed that could lead to this system eventually becoming a Cat 5. I'm sure you've seen the track. I'll put it one more time here on the screen, including the intensification once it stops interacting with Cuba. And by the way, look at how the track is forecast to go across Cuba. So it's basically right across these keys in northern Cuba, and if anything, across the flatlands that are there in central Cuba. And then after that glancing blow, off towards the northwest by 2 a.m. Saturday on final approach to the middle Florida Keys. Looks like it would be headed right for the 7-mile bridge if this forecast came to fruition. And the winds would be sustained at 160 miles per hour. And then as a Cat 5 approaching the Marco Island area, and then losing strength overland over parts of Florida and heading further towards the northwest. I can also show you right now what you can expect in several locations. And I'm going through this almost every hour because this information is really extremely valuable to, well, our community that's watching us from these different locations in South Florida. Tropical storm force winds to arrive 1 to 2 o'clock on Saturday for Key West, and then your peak wind gust from this hurricane could reach 106 miles per hour, and that would happen on Sunday, early on Sunday. You can also anticipate in Key West up to 7 inches of rain from